take shape, so I blast off. Super handcrafted, always hard, never soft. Pyrex like I'm cooking in the kitchen. I'm the chef, got the recipe, what I'm missing. So I put it in the kiln for a minute. Take another rip just to let my mind.
All right, welcome, Michael Silvia, right?
Yep.
I didn't even ask. I was gonna say Silva, but I saw the
happens all the time.
Michael Silvia.
Yeah.
And I'm Chad O. This is our pretty much inaugural Toking Today podcast. We're trying to talk about things that relate to everybody nationwide, but bringing in subjects like Hollywood, cannabis, hemp, CBD, and bringing it all into one platform where everybody can come in and talk.
Sure.
So I have Michael here today. He's we go way back, probably 2012, 2013-ish.
Exactly.
And but today he's here with Herb Swift, which is a CBD online delivery app. CBD at your doorstep, basically. I'll let Michael tell us a little bit more about that. But welcome, Michael Silvia, today, everybody. Woo! Yeah. All right, Michael, go ahead and tell me about yourself.
Well, first off, thank you, Chad, for having me here and give me the opportunity to come in and share my thoughts on some of these subjects. So,
sure.
As far as Herb Swift is pretty new. We just we founded in 2018, but we really didn't start any operations until a little earlier this year. We're about to launch. We've had a website on it, up and running, and we've been servicing customers interested in purchasing CBD online across the country since about March.
Right.
We've been promoting and getting excited and getting amped up for the launch of our app. So we have an app that is going to be launching both in the Apple iTunes Store and the Android Store in the next couple of weeks. We're actually doing beta testing right now, so just making sure everything works. So, making sure cards work, credit cards can get processed, the addresses are coming up fine, live delivery, notifications, push notifications, alerts, all that stuff's working perfectly before we launch it.
Yeah,
so
definitely important to make sure it's beta tested, huh?
Exactly,
but
exactly.
You can have it on your phone, choose your products, click the button, and watch it come to your door. Is the end goal of the app.
Yeah, I'd say that the convenience of getting it the same day if you do need it, with no additional cost, or at least comparative to ground shipping or something like that, is definitely where almost all industries are heading in that direction. They call it the on-demand hyper growth. And so I don't know if you follow Gary Vaynerchuk, but I'm a big fan of Gary V, and he's very inspiring. And one of the things I think he talks a lot about is this hyper growth of the on-demand industry, the shared economy industry. And he's predicting that within the next 5 to 10 years, you'll basically be able to get anything within a 5 to 60 minute window.
Wow.
So whether it's dog grooming or haircut or, salon.
So it's to be that quick, within an hour, you'll have it at your door, basically.
As far as ours, we have basically blocks right now. As we get more and more busier, it'll
down
probably,
the future.
So we have windows that the customer can select, and it's, it starts within about basically an hour to two after you've ordered it.
Wow, that quick now.
That quick. And, I think we'll get even quicker as people get more and more excited and share this information with people and introduce, our company and our platform to their friends and family.
Well, Herb Swift definitely makes sense as an app name for that. I mean, that's definitely pretty swift, my friend.
I like to keep things simple, Chad.
Yeah, that's great, man. So for those who don't know CBD or why you would need home delivery for CBD, I mean, obviously CBD does a lot that we know of, but people can't often get out of their house for CBD. And, it's very important to be able to get it to them, where they don't rely on somebody else to bring it to them or have to take them to somewhere to go get it. So I think an app like that is very important. Some of the benefits that you're seeing come through your site right now, what kind of testimonies are you hearing about?
Testimonies are always a tricky subject with the with the FDA looming around the corner. But the reality is, it doesn't take much research. Just 10 minutes online, you can figure out all the different things that this is helping different people with. And what I like to do, as opposed to kind of getting really specific into testimonials, which might actually get me in trouble with the FDA,
I don't want to do that.
I like to educate people on why it works for so many different things. So. What's unique about these phytocannabinoid CBD and these other ones that are becoming more and more relevant, you're going to start to hear them as individual cannabinoids taken, for specific purposes.
And you're talking cannabigerol.
Exactly.
CBG,
CBD, CBN, CBC, CBL, THC, THCV, etc. But with these cannabinoids, these phytocannabinoids, they obviously stimulate a system in our body that we refer to as the endocannabinoid system, which is a system of receptors and transmitters that actually we endogenously create a very similar molecule. If you've ever had runner's high, that's actually the molecule known as the endogenous molecule, meaning it's naturally produced in our body, known as anandamide. And ananda is the ancient Sanskrit word for bliss. So it's literally known as literally translates as the bliss molecule.
Wow.
And that's what the runner's high is. When you get that runner's high or that second wind or whatever, you actually, your endocannabinoid system is kicking in because of all the stress of running or whatever, or the physical exertion, and your body's starting to produce a bit of anandamide to get you through that.
So we start producing cannabinoids to replace what's missing from our body as we...
Yeah, well, that's where I was going with the whole testimonial question is, what is this endocannabinoid system? Why do these cannabinoid supplements like CBD, why do they seem to assist with so many different types of issues, right? Yeah. And the answer to that is actually fairly obvious if you study it. And so the endocannabinoid system is a system of receptors and transmitters that are primarily located throughout the central nervous system, but really these transmitters exist in virtually every major system in the body. So whether we're talking the nervous system, the digestive system, which of course is closely connected to the immune system, the skeletal system, the integumentary system, the reproductive system, the lymphatic system, so forth and so on, all of these systems, virtually all of them, contain receptors and transmitters. So that tells us that the endocannabinoid system is kind of like a master thermostat for the entire body. The best analogy that I've ever heard, and I love to repeat it, is an orchestra analogy. If you've ever been to an orchestra, there are different sections of instrument sections. So there's like a wind, a brass, a percussion, and so forth and so on. And they all have their own sheet music, and some of it's a little bit different. And they're all basically trying to stay in rhythm, stay in harmony, not drown the other one out, or be too loud, or be too fast, be off beat. And that's really where the conductor comes in. He hasn't written the music, he's not playing the music, but what he does is he's got an ear and eyes on the entire orchestra, and he can see if someone's pace is picking up or if someone's getting out of harmony with the melody, and that's what he does. He communicates using nonverbal cues to control these different instrumentation sections, and that is almost exactly what the endocannabinoid system does.
So it's the conductor of our bodies, basically.
It's the conductor of all the other major systems.
Wow.
And I think that's why when you take these supplements, you start to realize why it actually does so many of the different things that people claim it does, right? In so many different systems, whether it's something that might affect the nervous system, something that might affect the immune system, and so forth and so on.
So testimonials might not be the same results for everybody. It's because their systems are being conducted at different rates, different tempos, different speeds. So they might need it in a different area than somebody else. So CBD just goes in there and starts leveling all that out to the right tempo.
Yeah, I believe that's more or less what it does. And I think everybody has slightly different genetics, which means they have slightly different biochemistry, and they have other different things going on. There's lots of variables. Do they sleep well? Do they get exercise? What's their diet like? How's their emotional stress levels? Are they in a job they can't stand, or whatever? So there's lots of things that factor into this. And I think what supplementing with cannabinoids, in particular, phytocannabinoids like CBD, can really do is it can kind of bring people, back to that baseline where they're supposed to be operating, they're supposed to be.
Right.
And that means you sleep better. That means you don't feel as creaky and achy, and it's you're a little more mentally focused at work or what have you. So that's why I think you're seeing what you see.
Right. So when they say I don't feel anything from CBD, it's because you're not supposed to feel anything from CBD. You're supposed to feel normal.
You know what? A testimonial that I can say that's one of the most common testimonials I hear.
Sure.
In about 7 years now of doing this, the most common one I hear is that most people report that they don't actually notice exactly what CBD is doing them, other than a few of the real obvious things, like maybe calming them down a little bit or helping them sleep a little bit better. But they don't really notice the nuance of what it does for them until they have taken it for a little while and then stop taking it for a little while. That's when they realize, those aches and pains that were
gone, they're back.
They were. For me, I take it every day, and I take a full spectrum CBD soft gel that I feel definitely helps me sleep. In fact, that's really why I got into cannabis a long time ago to begin with, as I was suffering from insomnia. So But I also noticed that when I take it religiously, the knee issues that I have, was diagnosed with a bit of osteoarthritis in my knees just from playing sports my whole life. And I noticed that I don't even notice it. I forget about it completely. And then if I stop taking it for maybe 2 or 3 weeks, I start to feel that knee kind of get a little creakier. So that's my personal testimonial, but that's commonly what I hear is, I didn't really notice exactly what it did for me until I stopped taking it for a little while.
Do you find ingestibles being better than topicals, or do you think they're a good blend to have both of, or what do you?
I would say in general, absolutely both are very, very effective, very, very useful products. The integumentary system, your skin, it's the largest system of the body.
Sure.
So there's lots of receptors there. There's a good reason to use it topically like that. When you use it topically, though, you're not actually ever getting it into the bloodstream.
It's just going right where it needs.
Yeah, exactly. That would be considered a non-systemic application because you are not getting it into the bloodstream. Typically, these carrier oils, you see like beeswax, arnica, lavender oil, things like that tend to be in these blends with some CBD oil. And they just don't carry anything that far through the skin that it can actually get into the bloodstream.
I got you.
That's known as transdermal, and that's usually FDA regulated, and that's a whole nother story. So yeah, I actually generally recommend that people try both, especially if they have issues with their skin or just pain, inflammation or whatever. But I firmly believe, we were talking before the show started about there being some topicals now in big box, but no ingestibles yet.
Right.
And we've seen a nice little boost in the industry as a result of some of these big box stores and household name retailers carrying some CBD products. But I still think it's just the tip of the iceberg.
And you get something at a big box retailer like say Fry's or whatever, and you walk in, they got the information on the side, or it's there, and but you don't really have anybody to talk to. Is this going to really help my arthritis? Is this going to help with my my joint pains, my knee pains? Am I taking this right? Is it safe for my pets to get into? There's stuff that a retail clerk just is not going to know.
That's a problem even in the CBD industry. You've probably seen these quote unquote CBD dispensaries or these alternative health shops.
We have 3 of them,
Yeah. So they're all over the place, and some of those people are great and they're passionate and they're super educated and they've done their homework. But for every one of those, there's probably 2 who haven't.
And that's why we did it. There were smoke shops telling people you're going to get high, or just different things. And when CBD first came out, it was such an explosion that all these places were popping up. And so yes, education was very important. That's actually why we're broadcasting from the Herbal Risings education page today, is because that's number one. Make sure that the education, the information gets out there to the patients from the people selling it. And if the people selling it aren't educated, get them educated, because that got to have that education. You got to know what CBD does for you. You got to know what it does for other people and why it's important to have in your system, like we're talking about today. Listening to this podcast is a great way to get that information into you. But, just do everything you can. Get yourself educated, Google, go online, take a certification, do whatever you can to find out the most information you can, because everything that's coming out new, you got to be able to pass it on to the patients, the people that you're helping.
Yeah.
And, when they walk into a big box shop and they see that topical there, they might buy it because you helped them understand it, but they might not know exactly everything. And don't look at it as competition. Look at it as a community. And the more information you get out there, just the better the community is going to be, because they are going to come back. It's all going to come back to you eventually. And just start sharing, and educate yourself. Don't educate yourself with the wrong information and start sharing the wrong information. Know what it is and make sure that's verified information and a reputable source.
Agreed. And that is something I think the big box retailers are aware of as a weakness of theirs.
Yeah.
I think if you look at, you had mentioned Fry's, and that's obviously part of Kroger's. And if you look at the Kroger's outfits that are carrying this now, they tend to have it in their pharmacy section,
right,
not too far away from the help desk there. But the reality is, and I do this sort of stuff pretty frequently just to see where the industry is and how it's matured, but when you sit down and you try to talk with them about it, they have a long way to go. I'm sure they're very intelligent. I'm sure they'll pick it up.
You can say about lidocaine really well.
Exactly. But as far as this, most of them still have a ways to go. But the good news is, like I said, having consulted for some of these brands, and we carry some brands that are actually available at some of these big box stores.
Right
we
on.
also carry them at Herb Swift. So I'm very familiar with these people. Probably consulted for them at some point. But I know that a lot of these places are aware of that. That's part of the reason why they're starting it there. But they put it in like most people, they kind of ready, fire, aim, right? Everybody's excited about this, so they just threw it out there before they really had trained their pharmacy reps, right? So that's where it's at. That's where it's headed. And with us, we have a 24/7 chat. We try to be 24/7, but it's not. We're still kind of a smaller operation.
Manpower is
So I mean, if you try to get us at 3 a.m, it's probably not. But
but somebody will get back to you.
Exactly. Yeah. But we do have that chat available on the site, so
awesome.
that people have any questions or just don't even know where to get started, we can at least provide some basic consultation for them.
Let's take a look at the site here. I know the software we're broadcasting through doesn't give us the full colorization, so bear with me a little bit on the live broadcast. Everybody watching it, this is much more colorful than the grays you see online. But the greens and the blues don't show up. I'm wearing a blue shirt today, but I know it looks gray online too. So I apologize for the color delay, but we are going to figure that out. I was trying all morning to figure it out. But Herb Swift here. This is your website. I see you got the map where obviously it's a delivery site. That's the main goal. Get it to your door.
Yeah. Our again, we can ship just about everywhere now. I mean, there is maybe 2 or 3 states left that are still prohibiting even CBD, but they're relatively insignificant, and eventually I think they'll turn anyways. But we can ship just about anywhere, and then for same-day delivery, actually using the app,
which is coming up soon.
Yeah, which is, again, a couple weeks out. That is locally here in the Phoenix metro area, basically Maricopa County for
so that's the beta. That's where we're going to start.
Correct.
That's cool.
Correct.
So I see you have a lot of different products on here already. You got tinctures, topicals. I'm seeing lotions, dog treats. You got a good variety of things here. I mean, we see patients coming in all the time who want something for themselves and then don't realize that pets can have these products.
We really wanted to start with lines that we considered reputable, and again, my 7 years in the space kind of allows me to really have the background on some of these folks. Who's behind them, what are their stances on safety and quality and testing and things like that. Do they provide third-party testing, which is something we pride ourselves on. We, I think probably 95% of the products on the site right now and on the app platform will have a COA, a certificate of analysis with it, so you're getting what you pay for. And eventually, we hope to have that number at 100%.
Sure.
So, but yeah, we try to carry just about everything. We have pet products. We have bath and beauty products. We have concentrates for vaping or even cooking with concentrates and things like that. We obviously do. Some of your listeners are probably familiar with the concept that there's different CBD formats out there, such as isolate or broad spectrum, meaning most of the other cannabinoids and plant material, but no THC.
Right.
And then full spectrum, meaning most of the other cannabinoids and plant material and the THC up to 0.3%, which is what's legally allowed. So we have products that pretty much cover just about everybody. And again, most of these brands are either pursuing U.S. Hemp U.S. Hemp Authority certification, or already have it. So that's what we're trying to do, is really create something where it's as easy as possible for people to know they're getting something that they can trust.
We went over that the U.S. Hemp Authority Association just briefly just now. Tell us a little bit more about what they're doing and why you are looking for that seal on your products.
So there's 2 reasons why I'm a fan of it. One, I'm familiar with the leadership group behind it. You probably heard the name Hoban Law Group.
Okay.
It's hard to be in the industry and not have heard that name. They're involved with it. The U.S. Hemp Roundtable, which is also sort of an extension of the Hoban Law Group, is involved in it. And so there's good leadership there that are actively part of policy making. They're actively a part of the industry, actually providing business counsel to a lot of the brands that we've come to know. And they're before, trying to get ahead of regulations and say, look, we're capable of doing this ourselves. And they're doing it based on what consumers are really ultimately demanding.
Nice.
The one thing with this still being a relatively young industry, which has really only tapped into the most passionate and most conscientious consumers, is these people know. These people are awake. These people know what to look for. They know they want to see that it's pesticide-free and glyphosate-free, and they want to know it's non-GMO and so forth. They want to see testing of the biomass to make sure there's no heavy metals. They want to see all that. And so that's what's driven the lab market. And I know a few of the same people that I do that have done really, really well opening a lab. And again, a lot of this all started well before any regulations were put in place. Regulations kind of came after.
Well, they're still not even here yet.
In some states they've started, but here in Arizona they haven't started yet. So, but the good news is when consumers demand things, they get it. They get what they demand, and that's the beautiful thing of the free market. So, and that's the second reason why I like it. I'm a big proponent of the free market. I love what this state has actually done with the hemp program here, which all those rules were announced by the Arizona Department of Ag back in May, the very end of May, early June. And it's very friendly. It's very free market, very, very reasonable licensing fees. And there's no real cap on licensing or anything like that. It's just, just tell us you're doing it. Just, sign up. You got to pass some basic background type testing or whatever, but depending on what you do exactly, there's different types of licenses, but it's as free market a government regulated program could really be. And that to me is a good thing. And that's what I like about the U.S. Hemp Authority program is it's an independent third party. It's industry driven by consumers, and they're going to set the potency standards, the quality standards, manufacturing standards, and they're going to go in and they're going to make sure that everybody meets these standards before they're allowed to use the seal on their marketing or their packaging.
That's good. That's the bottom line, is having those standards, and that's something that we've always wanted to do. When we first started, Staff MMJ and Herbal Risings, we wanted to have some sort of standards coming in. I'm so glad to see an actual a group coming in and setting those standards and saying, this is our seal of approval, and this is what it matches, and this is what it means. It's so vital. That's awesome that they're doing that. So with the U.S. Seal of Authority and the regulatory testing coming out, what do you feel the vape pen crisis, the concentrates thing coming up? Do you see it going away, or do you see more stringent?
That whole thing doesn't really make an awful lot of sense to me. I'm strange like that. I see things for what they are, not what I'm told to see by the television and the news. But my understanding of it is, anywhere from as little as 4 people to as many as 14 people may have died after using these types of products. Not that means that this is not important. It most certainly is. But show me an industry who hasn't killed more people than that in the last year, and I'll call you a liar, because there's not an industry that exists that hasn't, in some form or fashion, whether it's their employee or whatever, something has happened. So, I don't think we need to overreact. I do think we need to address it. I think there are lots of people who are ahead of this and are aware of this. And I think there just needs to be clearer direction from the industry leaders that they are on top of this, just like the U.S. Hemp Authority is doing. It's not that different, but what we haven't seen out of the vape industry, I'll call it, which I'm typically referring to, e-juices and nicotine and all that. And there is some crossover into cannabis-based vape, whether that's CBD or marijuana, but most of that industry, when people refer to that vaping, it's nicotine, it's e-juice, it's VGPG blends, and the reality is, I haven't heard, and I've been fairly close to that industry for a while, I haven't heard of any industry leaders getting together and setting some standards for quality and safety and things like that, like we're seeing on the cannabis side. So I think they are 2 separate issues as far as I'm concerned. The FDA is definitely going to squash a lot of what we see in that e-nicotine world. It seems to me as if they just kind of want to hand it over to big tobacco. You know, the R.J. Reynolds and Philip Morris's of the world. And that looks like it's already begun. Now, whether or not they treat cannabis, vape in that, it doesn't seem like they're going to. But that doesn't mean they may not use some of that precedence to justify doing something.
Do a little squeeze on it for sure.
Exactly.
With all these vape shops that are open now, and if there is some kind of major regulatory or shutdown, I hear a lot of them might be going CBD.
Correct.
That's going to be a scary market.
That's why I am so familiar with the industry. A lot of them saw this coming as far as 2 or 3 years ago, because the FDA has been talking about it for years now.
Right.
So some people began their transition or their pivot 3 or 4 years ago. Pardon me. And CBD seemed to be an obvious fit.
Sure.
And that's why you now even see VGPG
right.
e-juices that are they don't have any nicotine in it, they have CBD in it instead, and,
right.
Those are promoted for.
So that's my concern is that group going to come over and start making their own CBD?
They have already begun. They've already created new brands in the CBD space, and that's again, that's exactly why things like U.S. Hemp Authority certification are important. Some sort of third party. Again, I'm not trying to say that these guys are all bad or whatever, and they're all
But
I don't believe
if that's where it's coming from, it's coming back into our market, into our space now.
Yeah. Well, and the good news is we already have set some of this stuff up as an industry, like the U.S. Hemp Authority certification. So they either have to get on board and keep up with everybody else, or they're probably not going to succeed anyways. We don't really need to take any further action.
Yeah. So we've already a step ahead. So
exactly.
Buy trusted, tested, and authorized products. And the U.S. Hemp Authority is a great place to start with. Awesome, man. We talked earlier about, even like that brings into, the cream rising to the top, these certain brands coming up. Are you seeing certain brands that just stand out, that are always testing above or beyond what they say they're going to be? Or
most of the brands I've ever dealt with were very, very, very adamant about always meeting their label claims. Nice. I have very little, and I have a lot of experience, but I have very little experience with any brands actually putting product on a shelf that didn't meet their label claims.
Right.
So for me personally, again, as a consultant for 7 years doing exactly that type of consulting, I did not see it very often. If I can't even recall one specific time that I saw it. I've heard about it a couple of times.
On the retail side, we have these little brands come in all the time.
Sure.
And they'll say they're one thing, and they are not.
Well, what does it take? About $200 to build a beautiful looking website that makes
you
look like $1 million?
Yeah. And that's what we're running into. So, finding those trusted brands. There's so many more brands coming up every day. So I'm just people like you, putting trusted brands out there on the site, making sure that they're certified, that they're tested. That's very important, especially for this industry, because there are so many different people wanting to get in the space. And like we talked about, the vape coming in, the at-home people coming in, everybody wanting to get on the CBD bandwagon.
Yeah.
Or bandwagon. And, trusting where it comes from is very important. That's why we're trying to do this show, trying to show the face behind the brand, trying to show the people that are actually putting the products out there, because if they're not willing to put their face out there behind their brand, it's probably not going to be a good brand.
That's a very good point.
Yeah, so that's what we're all about here today on Toking Today. So thank you, Michael, for coming out and talking to us about that, putting your face out there and standing behind your brand, because A, that's very important, and B, customers want to see it. They want to know who they're buying from, and when they go online and see a website, like you said, it could be a $200 website, it could be a $2 billion website. We don't know.
Yeah.
So when you put that face behind it, at least they know, hey, Michael stands behind this, and that's very important.
Exactly.
To consumers, to people, to everybody. So awesome, man. What are you feeling about the legal cannabis market coming into Arizona?
Yeah. So I know there's some debate yet again over adult use laws, and I understand that there's I know a couple of years ago, the initiative that actually made it to the ballot, I wasn't a fan of it, based on my understanding of it. I know a lot of people in the industry who were not fans of it, and for various reasons. It wasn't like it was a single issue type thing. It seems like we're stuck dealing with the same thing all over again this year.
Sure.
I haven't been playing as close attention to it this time around, because it is kind of frustrating.
Oh.
And I don't really even believe in politics. So
I see that be more common lately.
I think voting only encourages them. So, that's my opinion, but I get it. People have a lot to risk, it sounds to me like there's still some debate, and we still may we're going to end up with something on the ballot, an initiative on the ballot, but we have to, as consumers, look very, very closely at it before we vote for it.
So you're not for even if it saves a couple of lives or a couple of people from going to jail, don't vote yes, really look into what you're voting yes for?
I think that in my lifetime, the way government works is it's very hard to change something once you vote it. So it's better to get it right the first time. here's my point to that. Okay, well, it might save some lives. Well, look at some of these other states that have already passed adult use. They still have people getting raided. They still have lives getting lost.
Yeah.
And they've got these adult use laws. So it's just not that black and white.
Okay.
And, people have to really put a lot of thought into it, what they're supporting when they do that. So, the other one, like I said, a couple of years back, definitely had some draconian DUI laws and things like that. And it's tough. THC is going to stay in your system for a little while. It's going to stay there for at least a couple of weeks, and that's
they got
tricky.
Marijuana breathalyzer coming out. There's so
and all of it's really unproven.
Yeah. So that's good.
They have these field tests, which are very commonly used for testing whether or not a flower material or crude material that
contains THC.
Yeah, contains THC above the legal amount, and they're notoriously inaccurate. They're these little vials with a little
color.
Yeah, they have a little reagent already in the vial, and then you just crumble it up and you stick it in there, and then it turns a certain color, and the robustness of the color indicates the THC level. But they're not accurate. They're not super accurate. Like the difference is
the color scale. Yeah, it's very,
yes, exactly. It's significant difference just from one color to the next as far as the percentage.
Yeah.
And then you're also at the mercy of the people looking at it.
Yeah.
What if they're
colorblind? Is it
colorblind?
nighttime? Is it daytime?
Yeah. What if they're colorblind?
Yeah,
So it's. I think we need to
look at regulations.
We need to look at them because the government has shown us they'll use every inch of that law the way it's written to further their influence over us.
So do you see it going on a national scale? I mean, I know Washington D.C. has medical marijuana. I think did Washington D.C. get legal?
Washington D.C. itself is legal for adult use.
Wow,
correct. So your leaders, your masters can use it. I don't know if they do. If they did, they probably wouldn't be the way they are. But they can use it in D.C., but you can't.
Wow.
Well, you can if you have a card.
Is that not crazy?
It's super crazy.
It's got to be a test market. I mean, I would assume that they got to be.
From what I can tell, not enough politicians are using it. So
wow, you got to see the difference it's making in your city. I know D.C. I mean, D.C. was a pretty rough area for a while. I mean, it's got to be using some tax dollars to clean it up with that marijuana money now.
Yeah,
I'm sure there's.
Yeah.
I mean, I know Colorado turned around big time. I mean, we're seeing it with a little bit of it's coming off the street with the medical marijuana. So, I mean, there's definitely an impact being made. So hopefully they see it. But if it does go federal, I know like the hemp, like we talked about, a couple states still won't let you ship to them because they have their own hemp CBD laws in their states.
Correct.
Some of them are prescription only. Some of them just don't allow it. But on a federal level, it's legal. So you're still not every state it's legal in because they said no.
Yeah, it's kind of like the opposite of marijuana right now. Federally, it's legal. So what's ironic, I could go to a state like Idaho or something like that, where at the state level it's illegal.
Wow.
But if I'm in a national park in Idaho, I can have it.
Because
it's federal land.
Yeah.
Because it's federal land, right? So it's kind of the opposite. Like in California, even here in Arizona, if you have a medical card,
you can have it on the state land,
exactly,
but not on the federal land.
Exactly. Yeah. So you probably can't have it at Grand Canyon National Park or something like that.
Probably not, but not to say I didn't. Yeah.
Good luck finding him, right?
Yeah. That's.
But I do think it is coming at a federal level. I think. I'd be surprised if it's sooner than the next 2 to 4 years. I think 4 years feels about right, but you never know.
Yeah,
it's definitely coming though. It's just a matter of time.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, especially if they have federal in DC, there's got to be at least enough people seeing the differences. Now with Herb Swift, are you guys going to go if it goes legal here? Are you going to start doing the medical? Are you going to apply for the legal license?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we have to see how the regulations unfold, and we're not trying to get anybody in prison or anything like that, but the plan is definitely to expand into that side of cannabis as well.
So go all phytocannabinoids.
Yeah, exactly. It's definitely something we feel like we can build a brand and get CBD out into as many hands as possible. And for any of those folks who eventually are interested in trying THC, once that's an option for us, we'll be looking at that as well.
That's awesome. Now, we talked about CBG and CBN also. Are those federally legal to have?
Those are not explicitly listed anywhere as being prohibited.
Okay.
So by default, they're federally legal.
Right.
Now, of course, as you know, these are parts of both hemp and marijuana. There are parts of, so I think if it came from marijuana and it was clear that it came from marijuana, you may have an issue if it came from marijuana.
So we got to see hemp derived.
Because it's still considered marijuana because it was derived from marijuana.
I gotcha.
Right?
Yeah, makes sense.
So as of right now, the federal stance, if I can try to sum it up, for hemp is if it came from hemp, it's hemp.
Yeah.
Okay. Now that may eventually change on CBD isolate, and certainly if it's synthetic, didn't come from hemp. So that's different. That's regulated differently. I think eventually, I think with marijuana, that's how they treat it too, because CBD from marijuana is definitely treated differently than CBD from hemp.
That's a medical marijuana product that stays with patients.
Exactly. Exactly.
Now, have you started seeing CBN products come through your sites? Or?
Being that my primary consulting that I still do is very heavily, towards manufacturing, product development, and supply chain management. I am seeing a lot of these brands really interested in CBN and CBG products. Most of them are in the R&D phase. I haven't seen too many people launch a CBN product yet or a CBG product yet, but it's inevitable. It's definitely coming down the pipeline, and I encourage people to do some research on these other cannabinoids as well. CBN is showing to be very, very promising with sleep as a sleep aid and things like that, or rest aid or whatever. So these other things will be coming, and I think eventually we're going to know so much about this. You probably have seen some of these genetic tests where they'll tell you a little bit about your genetic ancestry, and they can even make diet suggestions, which are more agreeable with your genetic makeup.
So you've seen the app come out where it's going to match your strain with your DNA?
Something to that effect. I don't know if maybe there will be one that does strains as well for that person who's just going to keep using the flower material, which is fine. But I think eventually you may see something where it's reconstructed, sort of reverse engineered. Okay, here's your genetic profile based on where you grew up. These are the dominant types of phenotypes of cannabis that were in that area, and therefore they're probably more agreeable. And eventually they'll collect data on all this, and it will keep getting refined until the point where you have your medicine, or whatever you want to call it, your ECS elixir for your endocannabinoid system that's made custom for your ECS.
Yeah, wow. I totally see that. I mean, I remember when we first met, we were talking about an app that was testing marijuana from your phone.
My DX, I remember that. Yeah.
So I can just totally see the progression of all that coming together.
Yeah, that app is definitely collecting data on strains to try to make strains more consistent. As you probably know, you could go buy Blue Dream at a dispensary in Nevada. You could buy Blue Dream here in Arizona, and you could buy it up in Seattle, and you probably have three different, relatively different plants. There are going to be some similarities, obviously, but when you actually look at a test, a certificate of analysis, you're going to see different terpene profiles and primary cannabinoid profiles and whatnot.
That's going to be a lot of data they're pulling in.
Tons of data.
Yeah,
but
that's crazy. Well, that's cool, man. Well, we definitely talked about Herb Swift. Is there anything you want to throw back in that I missed on the Herb Swift? I know you have the 24-hour chat. We got the online ordering.
Well, we're obviously all over social media. We do try to put up some live content from time to time. We have some good friends of the industry and friends of the family here that are nursing and medical professionals and whatnot. One very good industry friend of mine is Nurse Courtney, and you can follow her at Black Nurse Leader on Instagram, and she is one of the preeminent specialists on phytocannabinoid integrative medicine and public health policy as well. So
say that name again.
Her name is Courtney Allen Gentry. She's a board-certified holistic nursing coach, an RN, and she's one of probably two or three dozen people in the country who's actually qualified to train other medical professionals on phytocannabinoid integrative medicine.
Wow. And her Instagram again?
At Black Nurse Leader.
Black Nurse Leader.
And so we have her on from time to time, and we'll just talk endocannabinoid system, and we'll talk isolate versus broad spec versus full spec, and we'll talk about qualifications of these third-party qualifications and like USHA and whatnot.
Let's talk a little bit about that full spec, broad spec, and just isolate. We sometimes hear people saying that CBD alone doesn't work. What's your opinion on that?
I think they are all extremely valuable.
Okay.
I have seen enough feedback to know that all of them work. Again, there are some differences. Some people have different biochemistry, different physiological makeup, different genetics. Sometimes one version works better than the other, but it's not very clear. CBD isolate sometimes works better for people, depending on exactly what it is they take or what they're taking it for. Sometimes broad spectrum works the best. Sometimes a full spectrum works the best. My advice to people when they're trying to figure out which is right for them is, one, do your homework, do as much research as you can about it. But two, do your homework on the brand. Make sure that they've got a COA. Make sure it's from a third party, so we know it's much less likely to be photoshopped or edited in some way. And make sure it's truly full spectrum. One of the biggest problems on our side of the industry, because we have such a firm 0.3% THC regulatory limit, is that when we're there, it's unclear right now as to whether or not manufacturers can handle material that's hotter than that, meaning above that 0.3. And the reality is, if I take a CBD distillate that's full spectrum, typically most manufacturers won't accept it unless the THC has been remediated down to the 0.3 level that they're comfortable with. But what that means, so I may have 80% CBD, I may have a couple percent each of, say, 2, 3, 4 different other cannabinoids, and then I'll have the 0.3% THC. Well, when I take a portion of that and I put it into a product, which that only makes up 2.5 or 6% of the overall product, therefore, say it's a pain cream. So whatever's in that pain cream, arnica, et cetera, et cetera. The whatever else is in that pain cream is going to make up 95% of the product or thereabouts, and that means everything else is getting diluted that much. So what happens is, when you do a test on that, even though you started with something that's full spectrum and had all those cannabinoids, sometimes some of those cannabinoids don't show up. In particular, THC, because we have to get it so low for most manufacturers to even handle it. Makes sense. We're waiting for the USDA to clarify whether or not manufacturers can handle it, material, and we can transport material that's above that, so long as it's documented that it's hemp and so forth. That way, in the finished product for the consumer can truly get up to that 0.3, which may prove extremely beneficial for some people. So that's kind of where we're at with that. And I would just say that hopefully we have some clarification on that soon. There are a few manufacturers who are willing to handle more. I personally believe the spirit of the law is 0.3% in the final product the consumer will be taking.
So the way I understand it is it's 0.3% in the raw product, in the dry weight of the plant itself. That's
true. So that's what makes it hemp. So hemp was finally legally defined for the very first time in the 2018 Farm Bill that passed in December. Prior to that, it had been included under the marijuana definition, but there were specific parts of it that were excluded from the CSA, from the Controlled Substances Act. So now that hemp has been legally defined, we now know that hemp is this dry weight, or this plant material that is from Cannabis sativa L, but has a dry weight percentage of THC of 0.3 or less. That's what makes it hemp. But when we do, nobody uses plant material. We don't just put plant material in cream and say it's going to help.
That's where you start making the isolate, distillate.
Yeah, you start extracting it, right? You do CO2 extraction or various types of hydrocarbon extractions, and you get a more manufacture-ready material, something that's a little bit more concentrated.
But that's where the THC level starts going up.
Correct, because as soon as, if it's 15% in the plant material, CBD, and 0.3% THC, and then I do a CO2 extraction, and that doubles the concentration of, so I'm now left with just an essential oil, and I've removed the plant material. I've doubled everything. I've doubled the 15% CBD to 30. I've doubled the 2% CBGA to 4%, and I've doubled the 0.3 to 0.6, and I'm now over the limit. So, and every time you continue to refine that, you're concentrating everything else. So that's the tricky part that makes it difficult for consumers who are truly looking for a full spectrum out there. The chances are your brand, your favorite brand, legitimately tried to use a full spectrum, but by the time they diluted it,
they got down.
It's maybe not showing up anymore. But you still have to look for it. You got to be careful. I think it's coming sooner rather than later, that we're finding ways to solve this problem, and so that we can have a consumer product that's higher, that has a much more obvious full profile.
That's good. Yeah, and what board or who's in charge of that regulatory?
The USDA, the Department of Ag.
So that's
everything now. So the DEA actually filed a Federal Register change about a month ago. It was very quiet. Unless you're paying very close attention, you probably missed it. But they officially announced in the Federal Register they're no longer in the business of dealing with hemp.
Okay.
So, of course, that's really, really interesting, and that's a side thing that I think is really interesting for your listeners in particular, that I want to talk about. But so that means it falls under the FDA if it's being put in food or cosmetics or marketed as a supplement, and it's being governed it's under the jurisdiction of the USDA as far as an agricultural commodity.
Right.
Okay. Getting back to what I was saying before. The fact that the DEA has put a Federal Register change into the Federal Register, an official change that basically announces they are out of the business of going after hemp, has kind of set an interesting precedent that will have to be tested. The smell of marijuana may no longer be valid legal justification for a violation of the Fourth Amendment for search and seizure. And the reason for that is hemp is completely legal, and it smells exactly like marijuana.
Right.
No dog, no human, nobody can tell one from the other simply by odor.
They both got beta-carotene, and that's
They both have very similar terpene, which is giving it that smell that you're referring to, right? So that is a very interesting piece of information that is very valuable to anybody who is using cannabis. You do not necessarily have to give in to a demand or a request. Usually it's a request that feels like a demand, but to search your property just because of the smell of marijuana. So I'm not an attorney. That's not legal advice, but that is an interesting precedent that I've actually seen a cannabis law firm put an article out about very recently.
Yeah, I'm sure it's going to take a long time before that really takes effect.
Of course.
I'm sure they'll use it as long as you
just
can.
Just because lawyers are saying, hey, we may have this defense, doesn't mean that the law enforcement agents out there are any closer to being aware of this.
Yeah. I mean, in court, when you finally get there, you have that defense. But when you're on the side of the road, you don't have any defense. It's up to that cop to either follow the rules or not.
Sure.
And that's the unfortunate thing. As a cannabis user, you're going to get discriminated against.
Yep.
Yeah. So, but it's a step closer, and that's the great thing about that.
Well, knowledge is power, and hopefully that empowers at least a few people listening.
Get your camera out. Say, I don't answer questions. It doesn't smell like weed in here. Go away. get that YouTube video, right?
Yep.
Make sure I love watching those in the morning.
Yeah. Protect yourself.
Yeah. Well, that's cool, man. So obviously, there's a lot of regulatory. Man, my tongue is totally tied on that one word. Anyways, there's a lot of enforcement coming on as far as third-party inspections, third-party testing, third-party individuals coming up and saying, "Hey, we are not going to take this anymore. This is going to be the new standard." And that's the great thing that we're not waiting for the government. We're doing it ourselves.
Yeah, it's driven completely by the customers.
Yeah, and the government started to say, "Okay, well, I guess we can't smell, we can't do this." So they're starting to adjust to our rules now.
Yeah,
which is awesome. We're changing
for sure, changing
the industry or the nation, the way things are done. So that's awesome.
It's starting to change the world, I think. Because it's some places are a little faster than others, but what we see here happening as far as ending cannabis prohibition is largely happening everywhere.
Yeah, and that's amazing. I mean, obviously, Jerusalem, places like that have been way far ahead of us.
Right.
But it's good to see America at least coming along and saying, hey, state by state, we're getting better, we're getting stronger, and we're doing this thing. And individual by individual, vote for it if you want. If you see the power in it, go for it. If you see something that doesn't fit for you, make your own opinions. That's what it's all about.
That's exactly what
it's all about. Being an educated voter.
Using your free will.
Yes, awesome. Well, Michael, I think we have covered quite a lot. We're still a little short on our hour. What else you got to say, man? I know we've talked about regulatory. We talked about CBD. We talked about cannabis. We talked about hemp. We've talked about all sorts of stuff, man.
I don't know. Is there a topic that you think your listeners could benefit from a bit more education on?
Well, let's talk about as somebody who's been on the career side of the industry and working with dispensaries. Do you see a lot of applicants coming in? What do you see from the applicant side of the industry?
Well, in I think it was 2012, we finally got the laws here for medical, and I don't remember the exact number, but I want to say it was around 40 licenses that, the government in their infinite wisdom said, we only need 40 dispensaries for the 4 million people here. And so within 2 years, I think it was, or maybe it was 4 more, they voted to add more, and they doubled the number of licenses, and now I believe we're closer to 80 or 90 licenses.
I think we have 125 total
okay.
now.
Okay, so it's grown.
Yeah.
So, the application process was a bit of a scam, in my opinion, based on what I had heard. I had heard that, there was a pretty significant dollar amount. You could submit up to 5 applications, I believe, and you were only guaranteed about 20% of your application fee back if you didn't get granted a license.
Right.
So kind of seemed like a money-making scheme to me. But that's, I think, also ties back into what we were talking about before with the bill that was the adult use bill that was on the initiative, or the ballot that was the initiative that was on the ballot in 2018. It kind of handed the adult use market right over to the existing medical market, and that just felt like an old boys network.
Right.
Not that they shouldn't have a right to go for more licenses. They most certainly should, but they shouldn't have more of a right than you or I to go for these adult use licenses. And I think that's one of the big things that left a bad taste in people's mouth and why it didn't pass in 2018. So hopefully, like I said, we'll see what happens with these initiatives. Seems like the one that's in the forefront right now is not ideal.
Yeah.
I will take a closer look at it, but it could be interesting to see how it unfolds.
Are you seeing the smaller mom and pop, the small businesses go to the side, and a lot of the industry going more commercial?
I would basically sum that up as consolidation, and I think consolidation on both sides of the cannabis industry, both marijuana and hemp, has already begun.
Okay.
I've personally seen and assisted outside firms for coming in and securing existing operating licenses and things like that, and accumulating them so they have multiple licenses under one entity or whatnot. And there's some ways that they have to do that to make that work legally, but at the end of the day, there's always a way to do it.
Sure.
Right? So they're doing it. And so this consolidation is already happening, and I think it's just going to continue to happen for the next 5 to 10 years. I think there'll always be a niche for your craft artisan style, farm to shelf type brand. But obviously there's also going to be your Philip Morris's or your Marlboro or whatever, your Newports, whatever.
Right.
There's going to be your big mainstream brands as well.
Well, they bring in their own they bring in their own regulations as well. So I see, there's like an HR, there's a lot more with a big company coming in than say a small one who, the owner is the one making the stuff, or there's
my experience is, and this goes for both sides of the industry. I wish I could say it's only one side, but it's both. Is there's still a lot of unprofessional people in the space. There's not a lot of experienced business people. Some people are literally just kind of learning this all under the gun, and all the agreements and legal contracts and all that stuff, all the legal applications they've got to fill out, and it's expensive for a lot of people, which is why it's kind of been, difficult to get into that, especially the marijuana side. It's been a little easier, and I think that's why we've seen more people jump into the hemp side.
Right.
But the reality is there's definitely still some maturity to go here for both sides of the industry, and I think it's good. I think it's safer for the consumer. When people who've actually, I mentioned earlier that some manufacturers wouldn't handle certain material.
Right.
Well, that's just over the last couple of years. And today, 7 years ago, 8 years ago, when this industry was first starting, no manufacturers would handle any of it.
Right.
So what happened?
Yeah.
There was a niche for people who had some of that experience to start something up and do some contract manufacturing, but they weren't this reputable, established, NSF, CGMP, FDA registered, clean facility. They were these small labs that got thrown together pretty quickly, and it worked. But there was also some issues. There's also some recalls and whatnot. And I think it's, again, a good thing. The more mainstream this goes, the safer the product will be, the safer it will be to use the product, and not have to worry about legal repercussions or whatever.
Sure.
So I'm all for it. I saw it coming, and I'm just glad I got in early and have been able to kind of carve something out for myself that I feel is very rewarding because of what I see back from our customers.
That's wonderful, man. Yeah, I see both sides of it. As being a small business owner myself, I definitely like the personal touch, but as dealing with employees that work for these companies and try to help them work in the industry, we hear all sorts of horror stories, and they don't have anybody to go to, and there's things like along those lines. I'm seeing that the bigger corporations coming in, they're bringing in those gosh dang it,
regulatory.
Yeah. That's a word I'm never gonna be able to say again. Apparently,
it's not my favorite word either, Chad.
Yeah, I'm saying it a lot today. But yeah, they're bringing in their own regulations. I'm trying to switch it up, but I can't do that either. But they're gonna bring in their own procedures.
Yeah, SOPs and their own standards of quality.
There we go.
And that's a good thing. Like I said, that's exactly what I'm referring to is, when they have better chain of custody, better traceability, things happen. It's not whether or not something is going to happen, like a product's going to need to be recalled for something.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. I mean, it happens in every industry. We could have melons that is a big melon recall or a big lettuce recall because of listeria or something like that. So that's why it's important to have good standards so that where you shipped all that stuff and you can send out information and recall that back and
and those bigger companies got big because they had those standards.
Exactly. Yeah, they know what they're doing.
Right.
And again, I don't want to hand all of this over. I believe this is a great opportunity for people who believe in the American dream, which
to get in also.
The American dream, in my opinion, is not just owning a house. The American dream is working for yourself, being your own king, right? Being your own master, right?
Having your own podcast.
Yeah, have your own podcast. So that's the American dream, and I definitely believe this should be open to just about everybody who's got the wherewithal to actually succeed at it. So, but at the same time, it's nice. Those bigger companies coming in are going to force the smaller guys to get better.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Treat your customer like you're a small business, but treat your standards like you're a huge corporation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. If you do that, you're probably going to be pretty damn successful.
Cool, man. Well, that's a good note to end that on.
For
All
sure.
Right. Well, Michael, I appreciate you coming in today. Thank you for talking to us on Herbal Horizons and Toking Today, our inaugural Toking Today podcast. We're going to put this out there for the world to see, and I appreciate you, man.
Hopefully it gets received well. I appreciate you having me, and I'm happy to come back sometime.
Yeah, Mike. Once we get it up and running, once we get our colors right and I can actually wear a blue shirt and not look gray, we'll definitely have you back on, man.
Sounds good.
Cool. Thank you, Michael. Thanks for showing up.